So welcome back to our 12 days of beef promotion. Today we have a special guest with us, Miss Jennie Schutte from Pilaroc Farms in Fayetteville, Tennessee. Jennie and her family have a custom meat company. And Jennie, tell us a little bit about your company and how you got started in that.
Well, so we're called Pilaroc Farms, and that's just a simple name that my husband, I call him the herdsman, came up with, and it's because where we live is nothing but a pile of rock. So we get a lot of different names. But we started a little over 5 years ago. I was on the road a lot traveling with my former sales job. I used to work for Zoetis selling vaccines and dewormers, and started having babies, and on the road was just too much for us. And so we decided to start selling custom beef, and then very shortly after added pork, and then after that added lamb about 2 years ago. And we sell retail cuts of beef. We don't necessarily do halves and wholes anymore. We are more dedicated to those that want to fill their refrigerators and the freezers for a couple weeks, not a whole year. And we sell strictly retail. We did start out wholesale and at restaurants, but found there was really a need for that end consumer who was really wanting our product. And so why sell wholesale when you can sell retail?
Exactly. Well, I know that you all really focus on the educational component and making sure that your customers know how to cook the products that they buy from you. So can you speak a little bit about that and why that's so important to you all?
Sure. We kind of pride ourselves on carrying more cuts than certainly a grocery store can carry, but more cuts than even a lot of butcher shops carry. And we know that we can't just say we've got oxtail and we've got Terra's Major and flank steak and hog jowl. Like, we have to be able to tell you that these are the ways that we cook it. This is where it comes from on an animal. This is how we cook it. And here's some recipes. So we try to educate as much as we can through our social media or on our website. We'll have a cut of the month. And I think our last cut of the month was oxtail or cube steak. And we just explain what it is, where it comes from, and recommendations and tips on how to cook those kind of cuts.
I love that. We love, of course, being from the Beef Council, we love education and talking to consumers about how to use beef products and the nutritional components of beef. So I'm so thankful that you all are doing that with your customers. So speaking of educational components, today I want to talk a little bit about how to select the best roast for your family. So what are some tips that you would give consumers in selecting a roast for their holiday season?
Yeah, I would say the number one question I get asked when customers walk into our meat wagon, our famous meat wagon, and they say they want a roast, the number one question I'm going to ask them is, how are you going to cook it? If you're going to leave it in your crock pot all day versus you want to cook it for 2 hours at a low temperature in an oven, that's going to direct me on and maybe understanding on what type of roast that you're going to need. It really depends on how you're going to cook it.
So what are some recommendations that you would make for if you wanted to do something less expensive?
Let's see, less expensive. Of course, you've got the high-end cuts, which are like your 7-rib, prime rib roast and your tenderloin roasts. But when you get to some of the more popular cuts that are either on the front end of the cow, like a chuck roast or even a brisket, at the end of the day, a lot of people think of brisket as in barbecue, but at the end of the day, it is just a roast that you can put in your crock pot. Those are going to probably be your most economical. They're also a little bit more the fattiest cuts. If you want a little bit more meat and less fat, you got to go to the back end of the cow. And the back end of the cow, you can get a lot of meat for a lot fewer dollars, certainly than your prime rib roasts. But thinking rump roast, sirloin roast, top sirloin, sirloin tip, and any of your rounds, you're going to get a lot of meat. And if you cook it right, medium rare in the oven, it's going to turn out great for you and be a showstopper for you at your holiday meals.
So visually, whenever you're picking out a roast, something that you recommend consumers look for?
Sure. If you're buying fresh from a grocery store, certainly look for color. You don't want something bright red, but maybe, just a good red, Anything that is a little browner, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just been sitting on the counter on the shelf a little bit longer. Some air has gotten into it. There's nothing wrong with it, especially if you're going to cook it within the next day or two. And sometimes you can save a few dollars at the grocery store for some of those cuts that have a little brown on them. Again, they're not old, they're not bad. You just need to cook it rather quickly, and instead of like us where we leave it in the refrigerator for a week at a time. And so there's some cost savings there if you're able to take advantage of that. But definitely look for the fat content. Look and see if it has marbling on it. That marbling, no matter if it comes from the front of the cow or the back of the cow, if it has some marbling in it, it's only going to make it juicier when you cook it. And that's going to help any cook out there. The best cooks tend to like a little bit of marbling on their roast just to help them out a little bit, to keep it from drying out.
Absolutely. So can you talk a little bit about what size roast you would need depending on your family size? So just for example, if you had 10 people in your family, that's what pound roast or how many pounds would you need? Can you talk a little bit to that?
Sure. You kind of want to figure, I think it is, the ratio is 8 to 10 ounces per person. And maybe you can also, it depends on if it's your main dish as well on your dinner table. If that's going to be, again, that showstopper and that's your only piece of meat, you could do a pound per person or even per 2 people. Again, so many questions if you're children in the family or if it's all adults. But you could go, let's say a pound uncooked. And then once you cook it, because so much is lost in the cooking process just due to moisture, they say average about 30% loss once you start cooking. So if you want to feed 10 people, that's something I would definitely recommend that you get from the back end of the cow. So any of your, like a sirloin would be a good size cut of meat, a good muscle that you could save a lot of dollars on. Cook it to a medium rare in your oven, throw in your rosemary and your sprigs of thyme to make it look pretty. I joke about the Grinch That Stole Christmas movie, you know, the big roast beef platter. That's what you want to present your family with. And so you could do that with something from the back end of the cow like a sirloin. But those are good cuts. And yeah, I would say start off with up to a pound of meat uncooked per person.
Oh.
And you want leftovers. You always want leftovers because people are going to.
You gotta have leftovers.
Yeah, they're going to come back 4 hours later and want more meat. Leftovers are always the best the next day.
And we're going to be having a section in the 12 days of beef in a few days about what to do with your leftovers. So
yeah.
So do you have any other tips that you want to tell consumers about picking out the perfect roast for their family?
Yeah, I would say just make sure that you know how you're going to cook it and what level of fat you're comfortable with. Anything from that front end of the cow is going to have a lot more fat. Anything from the back end of the cow is going to be more beefy, but it's going to be a lot leaner. So you just have to be careful how you cook it. A lot of fat can sit in a crock pot all day, but a very lean roast is going to be dry as dirt, and you are not going to like it.
You don't want to eat that.
You're going to blame the beef and not the cook, and that's not. Don't blame the beef. It's not its fault.
That's right. We call that operator error.
That's right.
Well, Jennie, we do appreciate you taking time to be with us today. We hope that you all find these tips helpful as you pick out your holiday roast for your family this year. We hope that you and your family, Jennie, have a wonderful Christmas, and you all stay tuned for more beef information in our 12 Days of Beef.
Very good. Thank you.